and Dr. Jagan independent stock, they had agreed, there were some conditions under which the country attained its independence. And as far as I know, there were some specific activities that were supposed to have been undertaken. Could you address those?
Yes, but first of all, I want to contribute a bit to what Aubrey said.
Go right ahead.
Aubrey mentioned infrastructure and specifically mentioned roads. To remind the Guyanese population that rural electrification was one of Burnham's main achievements. Rural electrification, as well as supply of potable and potable water across the country. Those are two important things that Burnham undertook as well prior to the PEP coming into government that are lasting things and that are things that can be used to measure what is real development in a country. I think it's important to note that Burnham was more holistic in his vision for the country. He saw development as an integrated process. Jagan, I would say, was patriotic. I think he wished the country well, but he was more kind of project-oriented, something here and something there. You couldn't see the nexus between all of what he was doing into one integrated scheme of things. I think Burnham's vision was so great that he had a vision of the Guyanese man and what was necessary to make that Guyanese man. So there was that fundamental difference in my mind, that whilst they were both patriots, whilst they both sought to do things for the development of Guyana, that Burnham had a more holistic vision of where one could take the country and where one could take the Guyanese person. So I thought I would emphasize that before I get to the question.
Independence, there were some projects there.
There were some undertakings for independence, and we need to be reminded of those as well. The question of Amerindian lands was one of the undertakings.
That's right.
That we would establish an Amerindian Lands Commission to deal with that question. The question of the Ombudsman was another one, because the whole issue of the ethnic balance in the public service was raised at that time, and one of the undertakings of Burnham was to establish the office of the Ombudsman. Now, this is very interesting that we could be mentioning these two things, because the whole question of giving lands to the Amerindian is not something recent. It came out of that activity that Burnham undertook. I think it was in 1969, we had the Amerindian Lands Commission report. And it is based on that report that a decision was made that Amerindians should be able to have ownership of their lands. And in keeping with that decision, under the Hoyt regime, in fact, a piece of legislation was passed that gave ownership to the Amerindians. That legislation did not provide for physical demarcation on the ground. But if one were to look at the act, one will see the act actually describe the coordinates in relation to the lands to be owned by Amerindians, so that in fact they had possession legally on the Hoyt of the lands which are now being demarcated. What the PEP is doing now in some instances is extensions to those lands. But the question of Amerindian land and the demarcation has its origin as Burnham's and the PNC's fulfillment, one of the commitments coming out of the independent stocks. Another commitment was the office of the Ombudsman. And that office was established by Burnham. It functioned and even sanctioned ministers of the Burnham government in that time. You had the issue with the Minister of Housing, I think, was Mr. Singh, David Singh, Minister of Works, and Hamilton Green. And the reports are there to show that Burnham allowed the Ombudsman a free hand in determining that matter. We live in a state today where it's almost over a decade, getting close to 2 decades, as much as the PEP in government, that they claim they can't find an ombudsman. And as a consequence of that, we have situations where the public servants have no resort for justice outside of going to the court, which deals with the breach of law. The ombudsman doesn't deal with the breach of law, it deals with maladministration, and there's no recourse. Another institution that came out under the Burnham regime was the Public Servants Appellate Tribunal. And again, that tribunal is not in place for years. So what we've seen, a lot of institutions that were supposed to represent the birth of the fledgling state and supposed to institutionalize a certain way of governance have not been upheld by the PPP, but were indeed, in the era of Burnham, upheld by him. And I think one ought to take a note of those things. So in a sense, we have gone backwards under the PPP in terms of state institutions that were intended to enhance the lives of the people and to protect their rights. We have gone backwards in that regard.
I want to open the lines, gentlemen, but we can continue the discussion as we go on. But I want the members of the public, because we'll just have maybe approximately.
But I think we should look at industrial relations before we go.
Yes, you can go right ahead.
Because,
because
Burnham,
as the lines over.
When the PNC left power in 1992, trade unions had a significant say in budgetary and other areas. Trade unions were operating in state and other institutions. A significant characteristic of the PPP since it came to power in 1992 was to seek to destroy every trade union that it felt didn't support them. What it did in the bauxite industry is well known. What it is allowing corporate power to do to bauxite workers is well known. What it has done to the PSU is well known. Though the PPP claims to be a working class party, it has destroyed the trade union movement in Guyana. And one of the things that have got to be done is the rebuilding of the trade union movement so that workers can have a say, even in capitalist societies of the old order, for the want of another concept. There is a struggle for the working class to be represented. Obama has support of trade unions. This government has consistently destroyed the trade union movement.
I want to go to the lines because I'm sure members, let us go to the line. Morning, you're on the air.
Pleasant morning to you.
Morning to you, sir.
I would like you guys to elucidate.
You need to raise your voice.
I would like you guys to elucidate for me. What are the underpinnings, or what is the framework or the blueprint for an egalitarian society? I would like you also to succinctly address where Guyana needs to start for us to progress and to become a power within this hemisphere. And last but not least, in terms of our overall system of governance, isn't it time that both the opposition as well as the ruling party sit down, as used to happen, I dare say, back in the 70s and so on, because there was this bipartisan meetings. Some were formal, some were in camera. And look at a blueprint for governance. I will cite Trinidad's system. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Aubrey, you want to go on that?
Yes. As it relates to egalitarianism, which in broad, simple language is equality, the evidence suggests that Burnham was in support of equality. It was Forbes Burnham who dealt with the education system, and Hindus who couldn't go to certain schools ended up going to those schools because of the action taken by Burnham. Bringing the Pandit, etc., at the same level with the Christian priests was an act undertaken by Burnham. Making national holidays for Eid, Yom Nabi, etc., were all action taken by Burnham. And so Burnham, I think, not to mention women, the things that were done in terms of equality for women were many. By the 70s, women were involved in all the industries, carpenters, electricians, etc. So a lot was done in terms of the promotion of equality. Now, the other question you ask about is government opposition consultation. Dr. Jagan liked to say, or used to say, that Burnham said he only had to talk to me. But there is evidence that the PPP was consulted. In fact, over the years, They were involved even in the process of nationalization of the bauxite company. When Dr. Jagan was suggesting that, look, remember when it started, Burnham was saying 51%. Dr. Jagan was saying, take the companies, nationalize all. People forget that. So that when Burnham is blamed for nationalization, people forget that Dr. Jagan's position was Burnham wasn't going far enough. We had to take all. In fact, probably the only person I recall from all the readings I've had who had a different view, Rodney's view was nationalization was a good thing. Clive Thomas, I recall, was the one that was saying that mere nationalization wouldn't do it. There were need for other changes. I'm saying this to say the opposition was involved. Now, the problem is not solely opposition involvement. I think what we need is a complete change in the approach to governance. And I now come to your question of
the blueprint.
Now, first of all, I believe the hardest area, you can put all the laws in place on people. If there isn't a change in the political culture, in the mentality, a desire to consult. The other thing I think one has to change in terms of bringing up a new governance system is people have got to accept that views will differ. People can differ. If you listen to somebody like Roy in Parliament, you see a man who decided that nobody could differ. What he said is law. When he came and talked about how they shoot down people during the crime spree, you saw a mentality that didn't see rule of law. And for you to have a new governance system, you have to have people who believe that the law is supreme and that the society must be governed in keeping with the law. That demands a change in the mentality of politicians. I think unless you can get politicians to change their mentality, politicians on all sides, in virtually most countries, the perception is if I am not with you, regardless of what you're doing, I have to be against you. Now, you need a culture of inclusiveness, a culture that says there will always be people who differ. We need to sit with them and to work out the differences and to try and find a consensus. Your new governance model has to be one that seeks to bring consensus. And that is why I am of the view that in a new change in the Constitution, we probably need to pass a budget with more than 50% so that you are compelled to consult to be able to get the support you require in a parliament, so that your governance model that emerges is one that is premised on rule of law. It is one that is premised on the respect for other people's view. It is evident that this government's approach is one which says we have all the brains, albeit the absence of it, and that whatever we say must be implemented. You just have to look at their approach to the majority. Their approach to the majority that the opposition has is not let's work with the opposition. Let's see what we can get through together. Their approach is, look, we can't govern unless we got the majority, and we will do everything to break the back of the opposition and ensure we dominate. We have to change the culture of domination. The other critical thing is that you need a holistic approach to government. You need to work out what you need to do in the education, health, and other sectors, and the economy, and come up with a comprehensive approach that allows you to ensure that Guyana develops. Take foreign policy. The government really doesn't have an interest in foreign policy. All they're interested in is doing the things so that they don't get pressure from foreign governments. If you have that approach, then Guyana is in trouble. And I believe Guyana will always be in trouble under a government of this nature.
Yeah, Vincent, you want to?
Yes, on those questions that the caller asked, I think first of all, in terms of the blueprint, we ought to go back to understand what Burnham meant by cooperativism, as opposed to merely cooperatives. And lots of people are not very clear in this. When Burnham adumbrated the idea of cooperativism, he was talking about the ethos of cooperation at every level of life in the country. And that is what cooperativism really meant for Burnham. It didn't mean just having cooperatives. Because from the standpoint of cooperatives, he talked about a trisectoral economy. Cooperatives, the state, and the private enterprise. And again, that that reflected the ethos of cooperativism, where there is cooperation between and among. So that in terms of any blueprint, one has to go back to Burnham's idea of cooperativism. Burnham was not an orthodox Marxist, an orthodox socialist. He sought to see things in a national framework. And in that context, he looked to our past to come up with this idea of cooperativism. So that was his ethos that he tried to create in the country. But he also had what may be called an institutional approach to development. Institutional approach to development. How does a country and a nation grow? It has to have institutions around which its principles are realized. And so Burnham had this institutional approach. And so when one sees things like Guy Bank and the Cooperative Bank and the Mortgage Finance Bank, those were institutions that were intended to foster a certain thrust.
Yes.
And so, in terms of egalitarianism, Burnham saw it as being equal opportunity for every citizen. Equal opportunity. But not only an articulation of equal opportunity, but a manifestation. And that is why he created these institutions, so that people can have equal access to funding for business, for example, Guy Bank. The whole question of the agricultural sector and how it could be funded. The Co-op Bank, the whole question of people at large and how they could get loans. And the Mortgage Finance Bank, the whole question of how people could get loans for housing. So all of his programs were institutionalized, and there were state mechanisms to make sure those programs succeeded. A very, very important one, and one that people didn't quite understand, was education for all. Free education. It is true there were problems with the education system, but I would say that those problems were as a result of economic problems. But the idea of free education itself could hardly be faulted, because Burnham saw education as a mechanism for individual liberation and for national development. And that is why he fostered free education. And again, here was the idea of this egalitarianism, giving everyone access to that main resource, education, that could foster their development and that could foster national development. So from the standpoint of Burnham and the whole question of development, the whole question of independence, the whole question of a blueprint, he created an ethos, or sought to create an ethos of cooperativism, and on that ethos, pursued the development from the standpoint of creating institutions that could create an environment in which people could collectively and individually pursue development.
I think to Vincent, we need to add self-reliance. Burnham's approach was to ensure that every individual sought self-reliance, to be able to rely on yourself and develop what resources were required. Now, side by side with that, Burnham had a policy called hinterland development, in which there was a broad program for the development of the hinterland, which was predominantly Amerindian. It is not this approach of the government of giving handouts with the aim of controlling politically. He developed the infrastructure and other things that were required for the Amerindians to emerge. Let us not forget the amount of people that got scholarships under the Hinterland Scholarships Program under Forbes Burnham. So that Burnham's vision, I agree with Vincent, was one that was based on an institutionalized approach rather than this individual political domination approach. People like to criticize Burnham and talk about paramountcy of the party. But if you check Guy Bank records, unless the PPP is saying that the entire quarantine and so was PNC, if you check Guy Bank records at the time of the closure of Guy Bank, 90% of the loans were for people in agriculture in Indo-Guyanese communities.
Let's go to the line. Morning, you're on the air.
Good morning to you, gentlemen.
Morning.
I am thankful for being at home at this time because I've been edified.
Just speak a little louder, please.
I'm thankful for being at home at this time because I've been edified.
Thank you.
Having grown up under the Burnham regime, I can recall Burnham making us self-reliant. Because through his policy, my mother taught us to do our local fruits. In addition, he has done us proud. But my question is, if you have this recording and others to sell, I would like to have a copy or copies because I need to let my children, my grandchildren, my peers at work, and those young women and men in my community to be edified, because lots of them who have now grown up under this regime have no idea of what that man, who is very charismatic, has done for this country. One of my brothers-in-law, an Amerindian man, got a scholarship he was in the hinterland, and he got a scholarship under Burnham to go to Queen's College. So I thank you for edifying me further, and I would like you to say whether or not you would have these copies for sale.
All right. Thank you very much.
If I can answer the question, we do not have these copies for sale, but what we seek to do, we have a website, Burnham Foundation website. I think it's burnhamfoundation.org. And we are gradually posting these programs on that website so that anyone who wishes to visit that website can see programs of this nature and other information of this nature on that website. Forbes Burnham Foundation, LFS Burnham Foundation.org website.
Thank you very much. I want to go to the line still. Morning, you're on the air.
Morning again. Having thus preceded your most recent missives and assertions, I would like to ask a very pertinent question. Same caller who posed the three.
Just speak a little louder.
The same caller who posed the three questions to the.
Okay, go ahead.
And this is the question. For those over whom a cloud may be hanging, whether it's perception or real, in terms of their fundamental inability or their advertness in terms of not consulting, as against those who have had a track record, groundings in terms of what it takes not only to lead a country, but for the country's development, a la some of the distinguished brothers present there on the panel. Isn't the time already past that someone needs to carry the vision of Burnham and Rodney and other true leaders, patriots, and nationalists of this country of Guyana in terms of bringing together all those who are even in opposition so that we can unite as one as it relates to nation building and as it relates to self-reliance, and just throw these things that have happened to us within the last 18 to 20 years out of the window. Who will do it? Who will continue the vision? Thank you, John.
Thank you. Aubrey,
I would simply answer by saying that is the challenge. I wouldn't go beyond that. I would say that's the challenge. And those people who are in leadership, that's what they're challenged to do. Those people who are emergent leaders, that is what they're challenged to do. Those people who aspire to be leaders, that is what they're challenged to do.
I have a slightly different approach.
Let's go to the line, Aubrey. Morning, on here.
Hi, good morning. I'm having a burning concern. It's actually close to 1 year now since this government has been reelected. And we have such an opposition, which is the majority in Parliament. And we that support the opposition went out and voted for the election and hoped for a better Guyana for change. We know which Aubrey Norton was a very vocal in society. And he also went out there as young people. But very little as we see coming now from the opposition bench. Because the 16% VAT is still there, I think we had a chance to remove such. Our flat is still over 500,000, you have to pay nearly over $1 million. And this kind of thing, this government continues to rape the Guyanese people again. It's very heartrending for us as Guyanese people and young people and thought we had a brighter future after this government was a minority government. I don't know what is happening, and it's being frustrated to us as well.
All right, thanks for the comment.
We observe the comments of the caller. Just to remind that the Burnham Foundation is not itself a political organization. It's a non-governmental organization that is dedicated to sharing with Guyanese the ideas of Burnham and, as far as possible, helping them to realize those ideas. So we note your comments, and we hope that the relevant people in political office are also listening and would have heard those comments. And you may have an opportunity after this program, another program, which is the real political program, to share those ideas as well.
Yeah, let's go to the lines. Morning, you on the air.
Good morning again, my brother.
Morning, sir.
I'm very proud about your program, and I think keep it up. But the problem that what I'm
Just speak up a little bit.
okay. The problem is that the young people are not going back to the history of Burnham. Burnham was a visionary. We have no ideas about that. What we have to look at, let us get to the grassroots, my brothers. The television station is doing the job. But let us get into every community. Let us speak to the young black brothers that is being shot down on the road or is thieving or anything. Let us get to them and educate them. That is what I'm saying. Your program on the TV is very, very good. I'm proud about every one of you, even my friend Norton. But we got to get to the masses. Come off the TV, let us get in the villages. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're approaching program time. We have 3 minutes, but I want to tell you viewers that we will be having another program on the 4th Sunday of this month again by the Burnham Foundation. And we, like Mr. Alexander said, so we seek to provide information so people can liberate themselves and try to advance their conditions and try to get things kind of corrected that they have been going through. That is our goal, and you can visit us at our website, burnhamfoundation.org.
So by accident.
You want to say something?
No, I touched you by accident.
Oh, I was saying that we would like you to tune into our programs, and you can visit us at the website. You will be able to get this information and many other information that we have posted on the site. I want to take this opportunity to ask these two gentlemen to make their closing statements before we bring this program to a close. But just before I do that, I want to take this last call. Morning, you're on the air.
Hello, good morning, sir.
Morning, sir.
Morning to Vincent and Norton.
Morning.
This is a very, very good program.
Speak up a little louder, please.
Yes, the program that you know having here, the State of the Nation. I personally, I'm glad that you have come to provide this type of program and information to the nation. Regarding the lots of propaganda that is peddled by the PNP about the things that Burnham did and you know, this is to enlighten people where they've seen two different types of governance, okay, that we're experiencing in Guyana. And we must thank Vincent Alexander, who has got us, because of his professionalism, got us thus far. Because if it wasn't for Vincent Alexander and probably others, we might have lost this election and the people might have a majority in Parliament again. And I also like to thank Aubrey Norton in the aftermath of the election, going with Linden and enlightening the people of Linden, okay, in their thing with the government. This situation that we face with here, it needs the people that I just mentioned, Vince Alexander and Aubrey Norton. They need them. I don't know how people could be comfortable with these people out of the party and off the stage. I'm not comfortable with it, and we need these people to get back there, because these people have shown us in the past, you understand, what we have to do to bring this government to understanding that this country is not theirs, but it's the people of Guyana. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Aubrey.
All I would close by saying is that I believe every political leader makes mistakes. I believe that Burnham did. I understand why the PPP goes out of his way to bastardize him, to make him into a demon. I try my best not to do the same about Dr. Jagan. But I do believe that when it comes to being a visionary and having Guyana at heart, I think Dr. Jagan had Guyana at heart as well, but Forbes Burnham had Guyana at heart, and more importantly, he had a vision as to where he wanted to take Guyana. Unfortunately, during the time that he was trying to do it, you had a PPP that spent time burning sugarcane, doing all the negative things, and people forget that Burnham's opponents weren't opponents who talk, they were opponents who destroy to ensure he didn't succeed.
I would say, Clayton, that one, we have to recognize that both Burnham and Jagan were patriots. I think they both wished well for the country. To recognize the vision that Burnham brought to governance and to development. And we have to get back to the spirit of the pre-1955 PPP, the spirit of the PPP in pre-1995, not necessarily the strategies, the spirit. And if we get back to that spirit, then we can pursue an analysis of what has happened from then to now and seek thereafter to do what is best for the country. And that's what we need to do.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. I want to say to our viewers, thank you for allowing us into your homes, workplaces, and other places, of course. And I want to take this opportunity to thank you for being with us and to tell you that we will be back on air once again the 4th Sunday of this month. And you can tune in back again. We will have another program of the state of the nation. And I thank you very much.